So if you're a longtime listener of the podcast, you kind of know my story of being in the high tech industry and switching over to coaching and writing and doing what I do now. I'm not sure I told the story about when I left the corporate world and I hung my shingle out to be a coach. I got a lot of phone calls. In fact, I got a ton of phone calls from people that I used to work with. And they're like, shit, Mark, if I had the balls you did, I would do what you did. I can't stand the stress. It's too much work. I don't know how I'm going to keep doing it, but I can't quit. I just have too much of a noose around my neck and I have to make these payments and I have kids to put through college. And by the way, I had little kids and I had kids to put through college and I had all those things. But I couldn't believe how many people were envious of what I did with my life by leaving corporate and trying to follow something that was important to me. So also, as you know, I've been following this thing called money Twitter. Whatever money Twitter is, it's a bunch of smart people trying to figure out how to make money online in their lives and really live a different lifestyle. And I found this guy named Steve Adcock, and I've been following him, and he's one of the few guys who's more mature about what he's up to. You know, because I'm 58, and a lot of these guys are in their late 20s, early 30s, so it's a little bit of a different thing for me. But Steve started talking sense, and when I looked into his background, he was in the high tech industry just like me, and he and his wife worked their asses off. But he did something different. He and his wife decided to work towards a goal of getting out of corporate and living life on their own terms. So now they live in an Airstream RV. They are off the grid. They have their two rescue pups. They write, they video vlog, and I think they're richer and more happier than they've ever been. And we're going to find out how. Steve, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate the invitation. I'm glad to be here.
So yeah, so I appreciate the my favorite thing about in fact my favorite tweet of yours. It wasn't an informative tweet. It was, sorry guys, I do like to chill with Netflix every once in a while, right? Like because Netflix is the death to all of us who want to be part of the hustle and grind culture. So that sense of sanity really helped me.
Yeah, there's that mystique on money Twitter where you could only do certain things, or if you watch TV for 10 minutes a day, then you're just not being productive. You have to be productive. You always have to be going. You always have to be hustling. You always have to be productive. But they're just missing the other side of that entire story that enables us to be productive by doing those things that aren't productive so we can recharge our batteries so we don't completely wear ourselves dry. They completely miss that entire side, and that is part of why I show up every day, to make sure that people understand that you don't just have to be a robot to be successful and do your own thing. That's not reality.
Cool. So most of the people who listen to my podcast aren't those people. It's more of the corporate guys and gals who are working and working pretty hard. That top 5%, that top 1% who
Sure.
did what we used to do. And I think they're going to be fascinated by your story because I love how it starts out with, you did have the nice cars, you did have the motorcycle, you were living the life. So just bring a little bit of your origin story in here.
Yeah, that it was. I lived a very traditional life. In fact, I think a week after I started my first full-time job, I dropped a half year salary to buy a Corvette, to buy a 1999 Corvette convertible, which I proceeded to dump another 30K into with a
Mine, mine,
supercharger. And
mine was a Lexus convertible, by the way.
gotcha. Okay.
Sonic blue.
Yep. This was Arctic White. It was a really badass car. I love driving it. It was the loudest car. It was the fastest car around. But it was also a money pit. But I don't. I enjoyed that part of my life, so I don't really regret it, even though it was super expensive. But yeah, so I had this entire career mapped out, or I thought was mapped out in IT, where you make good money, then you enjoy the nicer things in life, which is, I think, what a lot of us want to do, at least to some degree. So I had the house in the suburbs. I bought the new Cadillac CTS several years after that. So I had a Corvette, I had a Cadillac, I had a Yamaha R1, like the race bike. If you want to kill yourself on a sport bike, man, that R1 is a good choice because it is insanely fast. Would not do that again, but again, Glad I did it, but I'm also glad it's over with. I earned a lot of money. I spent a lot of money. I had the golden handcuffs. And I think a lot of us can relate to that because we don't want to give up that job, even though it might be stressful, because we're making so much money and we have the nice house and we drive the nice cars and we can provide the extras for our family. Not all that is wrong, of course, but I mean, there's a lot of nuance to this discussion, and I was certainly knee deep in the gotta earn more so I could spend more so I can feel like I'm happy and look like I'm successful.
Right. So you didn't have a horrible childhood that you were making up for. You're just a regular middle class guy. Your wife, and you're just on the treadmill like everybody else. What broke the fever? What made you wake up and say you needed to change?
There's one time, a Saturday, where I'll remember this, I think, for the rest of my life. I walked out into my garage. I was going somewhere, and I reached up to punch the garage door opener, but for some reason I stopped. I didn't do that. I did not open the garage door, and I turned around in the dark and I looked at what was in my garage. So I had like I said, I had the Corvette, I had the Cadillac, I had the sport bike, but I still didn't feel fulfilled. Like something was missing. And that was, I think, the first time that I admitted to myself that even though I make all this money and even though I have all these things, something is missing. And this isn't right. This isn't the way it's supposed to work. And so I thought to myself, well, can I do this? It was like a fork in the road. Can I do this for the next 5 years or 10 years and 15 years or for the rest of my career? Am I going to be able to live with myself by going down this path, by continuing going down this path? And
That's huge. That's
ultimately,
huge
that
right
answer
there.
was no.
That's
Yes.
huge right there because most people are so steeped in it that they can't even ask like they're scared to ask the question. We talk about midlife and people ask me, what's your definition of midlife? And it's not an age, it's when what was working no longer works. But often we're too scared to even entertain it because we may need to get divorced, or we may need to change careers, or we may need to, and none of that has to happen to just look and question. So you actually did that. Now, did you go immediately and talk to your wife about this?
Nope. In fact, that was before I was married. So
Okay.
at least the idea was planted in my head. I didn't start making immediate changes after that. I knew that something was wrong. I knew that something needed to be fixed, but I didn't necessarily know at that point what needed to be done, and how to fix it. So over the years, I slowly started to put the pieces into place by reading a lot of personal finance, a lot of FIRE type material about what other people are doing and
What
how
is
they're
fire? What is
making
fire material?
financial independence, retire early. So the FIRE, the
I saw
acronym
that in your
FIRE.
literature, and I'm like, am I brave enough to ask, or should I already know what that is?
It's a stupid acronym that is supposed to be like, I don't know, exciting or something. But yeah, it's the concept of achieving financial independence so you don't have to work. But then the RE part, early retirement, is you take that next step and you just quit what you're doing, and live off your investments for the rest of your life. That's the idea. And then when I married my wife a couple years after that point of standing in my garage, we had two incomes because she also worked in IT. So we had a lot of money that we can do something with. I'm not talking $1 million, like maybe 220,000 or something combined, which is really damn good. So we can either, we had a decision to make. We could live like rock stars. We can buy the nice cars and live on the house on the hill and go on expensive vacations, or we can save the majority of what we earn and quit as soon as possible so we could pursue a life that we actually wanted to pursue. And like you talked about earlier, that was airstreaming and traveling the country. We don't do that so much
But
anymore.
hold on, before you go into that, I'm really
Sure.
curious. Did you guys know what kind of life you wanted, or did you just know you didn't want the life you had, and then you started exploring the life you wanted?
Bingo. That's the latter part. We knew, well, my wife was okay with her job. I hated what I did. I hated what I did. Always working on somebody else's tech problems. I absolutely despise it. So I really wanted out quick. And after we got married, we started taking walks. And this is so freaking critical. We started taking walks and we talked about our future, what we wanted it to look like. And from that point, we had that end goal, the
Mm.
light at the end of the tunnel, that we knew what that looked like. So now we just kind of work backwards. And we discussed this, like I said, on our walks all the time. We discussed how to get from where we are now to where we want to be through savings and tracking our spending and things like that. So without that end goal, without that purpose, without knowing where you're going, it's going to be impossible to get there. So for
An
the
agreement on where you're going.
Exactly, exactly. And that's part of the conversation. There are some things I wanted to do that my wife didn't, and vice versa. But through the conversation with enough talking, we got to that happy medium where she's happy and I'm happy. Okay, this is it. We have something locked in. And now all we have to do is figure out how to get to that point.
Okay, so so now you've laid out a plan and a vision for your relationship and your lives going forward. What were the next steps?
Knowing that we had a pretty good income, and estimating the amount of money that we were going to need to pursue that lifestyle, which included selling both of our homes, buying an Airstream, and taking off. So we had to bridge that gap. So what do we do between here and there? The very first step was to track our spending and reduce our spending to the bare minimum, save as much as we can, invest as much as we can to really build up that nest egg, that pot of money that we're going to use early in life that'll hopefully last us for the rest of our lives.
I'm
So
going to keep
we
interjecting. I'm going to keep stopping you because
no
there's
no
really
worries,
because I'm
no
going to ask the question
worries.
that I know everybody else wants to ask.
Go
So
for it.
what what were the difficulties? Because it's great. Let's live below our means. Let's put everything into investment. Let's do that. But it's easier said than done.
Absolutely.
How did you guys actually shift your mindset as far as the money? Then how'd you deal with the social aspects of changing how you spend your money? Like, because people are going out to dinner and they're inviting you out to dinner. So there's very practical things, immediate things to and decisions to make in your life when you do make those decisions.
That's a critical point. And we it's easy for me to say that we wanted it bad enough to make it happen, but that's really the truth of it. But that's hard to get your mind around because that's very intangible. So I think one thing that helped us is we continued to talk. We continued the conversation day after day after day. We didn't just decide what we wanted and then we stopped talking about it and just saved. We continued to talk, which kept the idea in our head. Yes, this is what we want. Yes, we still want this. Yes, we still want this. And over the period of days and months and years, that idea of the light at the end of the tunnel is still there. We were always thinking about it. And when it came down to it, we wanted that more than we wanted the restaurants. We wanted that more than we wanted the new cars or cable TV and things like that. So we thought about all of our expenses as a trade-off. So if we subscribe to cable TV, we're probably going to have to work another 6 months. Is that worth it? If it's yes, that's fine, do it. But for us, the answer was most assuredly no. Same thing with the car, same thing with the restaurants. Is that worth working longer, or is that worth delaying the light at the end of the tunnel? That is only an answer that you can, answer for yourself. But for us, almost every time the answer was no.
And I
We
think it's the
wanted
only,
that
and you
light
can answer, you can
first.
only answer for yourself, but you can only do it with the support of your partner. It's
That's
like,
right. That's right.
it's so hard. Cause I remember when I went from having $500,000 a year income to being a coach, and like now I'm sub six figures and I still have an ex-wife and children that I'm supporting. And like, I traded the Lexus in for a Mercedes. Like I had no business trading the Lexus in for a Mercedes when I'm making $50,000 a year, but it was so hard to dial it back because now I'm used to having premium cars, right? Now I
Right.
drive a pickup truck and all my clothes come from Costco. I'm a happy guy, but it took me a long time to ramp that down.
Yeah, it does. It does. And it'll look very different. It's going to be easier for some people than for others. There's no doubt about it. And when your spouse is not on board, there's no question that's going to make it so much more difficult. But that makes having the conversation that much more important so you can reach that middle ground where you're happy and your spouse is happy. And then you have that goal to pursue. But there might be a case where you're just never going to get on the same page. It's just not going to work.
So you guys worked it out and you found your common ground.
Exactly.
When did,
Exactly.
when did you know when did you know the day was the day that you got both could embark on this?
You mean when we initially started
When did you,
saving
when you
more?
quit? No, when you quit. When did you,
Oh.
how did you know it was time to quit or shift?
It's
Because you didn't
it,
quit life. You just changed.
yeah, exactly. My last day of full-time work was December 23rd of 2016. The best Christmas present I've ever got, by the way. December 23rd. So about, I don't know, I think a year and a half previous to that, we just, there comes a time where planning's great, but you just gotta set a date and go. Just do it. And we are fairly flexible people. So we knew that if this was like the bad, if it didn't work out, we're going to make it work by making changes and just
Mhm.
making it work. So about a year and a half before, we just decided on, okay, well, I will work through the end of 2016. That's it. I'm not working another day again unless the shit hits the fan. Luckily, it didn't. And then my wife is going to work another year because, frankly, she likes her job and she was guilty about leaving. And she will admit that to you, too. She was guilty. It was guilt. It was 100% guilt. But I still quit my job in 2016 and I became the house husband, which was perfectly fine with me because I didn't like my job. So I'd rather do that than actually go to work. But yeah, I will probably remember that day for the rest of my life as well. Just the feeling of knowing that there's a good possibility here that I will never, and I was 35 at the time, by the way. I will never have to set foot in an office as a full-time employee again. That was a lot to wrap my head around, but that was the challenge that I was willing to accept.
Cool. So when you talk to people, so like you just, what you do for part of a living is communicate, and people are probably asking you, what are the biggest objections that you find people when they find out what you've done, how you're living, and they say, "Oh man, I wish I could do that," but
Yeah, or oh yeah, would be nice to make $250,000 a year, or it would be nice not to have kids, or it would be nice to be a white male, or to be nice this and this and this. And there's no question about it. Being a white male, no kids, having working in IT, having a wife that's on board, all of those things helped. That's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. And I'm not going to tell you it's not because it is. But the other side of that coin is it's not going to be as easy for a lot of people as it was for us. There's no question about that. But that still does not mean that almost anybody out there who has a marketable skill and makes good money, that doesn't mean that they can't do something similar. It might look differently. It might be harder. You might not be able to retire at 35. In fact, most people won't be able to retire at 35. I'm an anomaly. My wife is an anomaly. I don't kid myself into thinking that everybody is going to be able to do this. However, I do believe that the wide majority of us, like I said before, that have a marketable skill and has a job can retire early. So that might be 45, that might be 55, hell, that might be 60. It's going to look different to you, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the idea that I always like to put across on Twitter and everywhere is even if you have no interest in retiring early, even if you love your job, you're never going to stop working. Financial independence or financial freedom should be your goal, period, because
love it.
that's going to give you so many more freedom to really design your life the way you want it to be designed.
I answered one of your tweets and I said, your tweet was about, being able to retire early. And I answered, what if we never want to retire? Right.
I remember
But,
that. Yep,
but,
yep.
but the whole point of that is, but I want to always have the choice and always be able to, like, so what you're talking about, I think what you're talking about is like the goal, the holy grail. The goal would be at 35 to have enough money to do whatever the fuck you want. But there's a
Exactly.
whole continuum before there, because I know people who have $10 million in the bank and they're like, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to retire. I'm so stressed. And they don't understand that they're actually free. Right. So I didn't have $10 million in the
Bingo.
bank. I quit my job. I was giving thousands and thousands of dollars to my ex-wife and my kids and taking care of them and taking care of my elderly parents. I had every drag on my finances that they could. And I was able to switch. I took a big nosedive in my finances, and then I righted the ship. Right, my
Hmm.
my my practice took off and I'm doing great. But it was a few years where it was worth it to me to do what I wanted to do. So that we're talking about the whole continuum, is what I hear you saying.
Yes, that's right. And the early retirement portion of my story is like the sexy thing. Everybody wants to
Right.
hear about that and talk about that. I've been on CNBC and Market Watch. I mean, they always want the early retirement part. But quite frankly, I don't like to talk about that as much because that not everyone's going to want ER. That's not going to be the right decision for a lot of people. But the financial freedom part, the other part of the FIRE concept, that is 100% a awesome goal for everybody out there because like we're just saying, it's going to give you a lot more freedom. That if you, I mean, you may like your job now, you may like your boss now, but your company might get bought out maybe by the same company for 3 times, and your boss continues to change, and you just got an asshole telling you what to do every day. If you're financially free, you can say, F this, I'm out, and spend the next 6 months finding like the perfect position or something. If you're not FI, you can't do that. You might have to keep your job. But if you
FI
are
meaning financially independent.
financially independent, yes. So
I,
if you
I'm going to
are
translate for all you
FI,
guys because I don't follow well either. So,
it's all good.
you know, in your book, Big Money, which is an ebook that Steve has on his website that I'll put the link to. He says there's a statistic: out of every 4 or 25% of families who earn $150,000 a year live paycheck to paycheck.
Paycheck to paycheck. Yeah.
It's crazy. Like that's
It,
crazy, and I did it, and I understand.
it is incredible. And a lot of those high income jobs come with the implicit expectation that you're going to look like you earn 150,000 or more. If you're a lawyer, for example, and you're driving up to a client meeting in a beat up Honda Civic, that's probably not going to give across the same impression or provide the same impression as if you drive up in a new 7 Series Beamer or something. So a lot of those jobs, there's like this natural expectation that you're going to look the part. And when that happens, when you spend the majority of what you earn, even if you are earning a huge income, if you're spending the majority of it, you're really not building wealth. Income is way different than actually building wealth. There's a huge,
So
gap between those two
that's a whole
concepts.
chapter in your book.
Exactly.
So tell me the difference between income and wealth.
Well, I like to say that the wealth building equation equals your income plus your investments minus your lifestyle. Once that equation's set, everything else is effectively your net worth. So the idea is you earn an income, the bigger, the better, of course. Then if you can invest that income to really generate that growth in the stock market or real estate, that's going to be your best bet to really build wealth quickly or relatively quickly. However, that lifestyle component, which is what a lot of people, especially on money Twitter, forget to think about, that is going to subtract from your net worth. If you earn $100,000 a year and you spend $50,000 a year, you're not earning $100,000 a year anymore. Technically on paper you are, but you're not getting that at the end of the day. You're only getting 50,000 and then a bunch of objects, just a bunch of stuff. So the income is a part of it. I mean, that's what generates this entire wealth building process. But if you don't put that money to work for you in the market or some other appreciating asset, that money is not doing you any good, and it's not providing for your future financial freedom.
Let's move on to mindset, because one of my favorite articles you wrote is "The secret to life is lying to yourself." Do you remember do you remember writing
Yep.
this? I
Yes, I
often write
do.
things and I'm like, I wrote that.
Yeah,
Uh,
that one was a long time ago, but yes, I do remember that. Kind of like it's the opposite of imposter syndrome. It's like imposter syndrome, you just naturally believe that you don't belong or other people are better than you or you really shouldn't be here. But if you have to lie to yourself to make yourself believe that, yes, I can do this, I can make more money, I can be the manager, I can be the leader, or I can invest and build wealth, getting that mindset going, that positive energy is almost always going to be the first step in actually putting those pieces into place. Because if you don't believe that you can, then 9 times out of 10, you're not going to do it. So if you lie to yourself in a very like positive I can way rather than the opposite, that's going to be your very first step into trying some of these new things and just seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, and putting the pieces into place for you in your life in a way that makes the most sense.
I love guileless people who will walk into a room and it's just like, of course I belong here.
Like
Right.
they own their place. Yeah,
Right. It's like,
exactly.
of course, but then there's some of us who are self-conscious, so I'm, when I first got into tech sales, I was homeless in my 20s. And when I came to town, I was waiting on tables, for years and getting myself together and going to school. When I first got to the tech, I was terrified every day. Like I took a job that was so way over my head, and I had no business taking it. But I talked myself into a startup called NetApp, and they said, the bad news is you got the job. The good news is you got the job. And I just held on for dear life. Um, for people like me who actually don't have that, how do you help people with that mindset? Because this is what I do for a living now, is because I was that guy and I still was successful, I can help other people be successful no matter what's going on in their brain. How do you help people believe in themselves enough to go try and get that promotion or start that business?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to build confidence if you never try. So that first step is really putting that first foot, that putting your foot forward and giving it, like dipping that toe and just giving it a shot with something that's small. You don't have to go all the way to the top and ask for $100,000 raise. Maybe a $5,000, maybe a 10,000, or maybe a small promotion, just adding responsibilities to your job. Walk up to your boss and say, "I noticed that you're doing this every day. Let me do that for you. I can do that for you, and I can do it just as well. So you don't have to do that." Those things build that confidence that you get every time you do these small incremental extras, the extra things that will slowly help to build your confidence to the point where you can ask for those bigger things, that next step, and you're going to continue to progress that way. But if you never try, setting your sights at the very top level thing, like that best thing, is going to seem like it's impossible. It's never going to happen. So I always like to encourage people to start small, start where they're comfortable with, but yet you're stepping that foot outside your comfort zone just a little bit. And I tell you, once that door opens, and I'm sure you've seen this a lot in your career, once you open that door into asking for more and getting involved in more, taking on more responsibility, it tends to swing open pretty damn quickly, because you realize that
Shockingly.
this isn't nearly as hard as I thought. I can do this. In fact, I could probably do the next thing and the next thing. And that just snowballs. But the very first step is just getting that door open a little bit, taking on those extra things, doing those extra things, even if they're small. That is the foundation for building a lot of confidence in your life.
That's beautiful. For me, it's always being willing to fail. I'm terrified of failure. But for me, like when I got that job at NetApp, I was absolutely sure it was going to eat me up, chew me up, spin me out. And like I was just going to go crawling back to my waiter job.
Yep.
And
Yep.
but I just like I had to do it. Right. So I just steeled myself every day. I remember being asked, this men's group, they said, Mark, you make all this money. How do you do it? Could you give us do a talk on making money? And I'm like, shit, I'm not really that smart of a businessman, right? In fact, I'm not even sure I'm that great of a sales guy. So I got up in front of these people and I just said, basically, I'm terrified every day. But instead of pulling the covers over my head, I get up, I put on a ridiculously expensive tie to cover up my lack of self-confidence. And I go to work and I work harder and I'm prepared and I show up on time. And somehow that turned into a career, like every day. There
Yep.
was no secret sauce there.
Yeah, exactly. You just kind of accepted it. In fact, I remember I was a software developer at this nonprofit, and one Friday I got called into the president's office, like the very top level. I was a software developer. I got called into the top level, the president's office, and I naturally assumed my ass was getting canned. But he said, "So, Steve, we fired the director of your department, and we want you to take over." And for the next 20 seconds, I'm sure it was silence. It's like, how the hell? The answer to this is no. But what came out of my mouth was, absolutely, sign me up. I'm down. I had no idea how I was going to do this, how I was going to fill the shoes of somebody who's been doing this for 20 years. But then again, they just got fired and they obviously saw something in me, like they believed that I can do this. So it's in my best interest. And frankly, I it was kind of like it would be a slap in the face if I didn't say yes. I mean, the honor of stepping like 3 levels of management in one day, there's no way I'm going to say no to that. And I figured it out as I went. And it wasn't the best job for me. I ended up demoting myself effectively, but the experience was unlike anything that I've ever done in my career before. And it wasn't as hard as I had thought. Once I got into the rhythm and started developing my own processes, it just wasn't as hard. It wasn't right for me, but it also wasn't as hard as I expected. And I think for a lot of people out there, you're probably going to see something similar, that once you actually start doing those jobs, taking on those responsibilities, it may not be as hard as you think.
I have a client who moved from the corporate world to starting his own gig, and it's taken off and it's breathtaking. So he's having meetings with the president of iHeartRadio and Sony Music, like he's in the big leagues.
Yeah.
And he calls me and he's like, oh, what am I going to do in this meeting? Like I'm like, you earned your right to be in there. Put
Mhm.
on your big boy pants. Like we'll talk about the spheres and everything outside here, but now you have just what I said to him was, you set yourself up for a life over your skis. For the rest of your life, you're going to be out of your depth. You're
Mhm.
building such a rocket ship that you're always going to feel like it's too much, too big, too much. Just get used to that feeling. And that's what I did when I was in sales. Was I was just always out of my depth. I'm shy, I'm an introvert, I don't like to bother people, and I'm a sales guy. Like that's that's the lot in life I drew, right? So that was an interesting one. So I stumble onto this podcast and I don't even really know what the topic is. And I'm a corporate guy and I'm doing really well, corporate woman. I'm making 225, $300,000 a year. I have a nice house, all that. And I'm stressed and I would like to shift. And I don't know the first things to think about. Give me some down home advice. Like you just met me for a beer, and like what would you have to say to me as far as to start to think about?
Yep. I get this question a lot, and the answer is it's impossible to start putting the pieces into place or to start changing your life without knowing what's wrong. And in this case, it's
Mm.
tracking your spending. A lot of people just have no idea what's on their credit card bill, no idea what's on their bank statement. And I grant you, this is not a very fun process, especially at the very
It's
beginning. It seems
excruciating.
overwhelming.
Counting calories and
Boom.
tracking your money are the two
Exactly.
most excruciating things on the planet.
Exactly, exactly. But if you want it bad enough, you gotta get over that. You have to spend a couple nights going through the credit card statements and your bank statements, figuring out where all of your money is going. And then from that point, like categorize things in entertainment and food and car and house. So you get a good feel for exactly all these different, where all your money is going based on category. And if you're spending, I don't know, $10,000 a month on your automotive hobbies, for example, each individual expense, it may not seem like a lot, but if you aggregate that over a month, it's like, holy shit, I'm spending 10 grand a month on my cars. This could be going somewhere else. So that is the very first step. It's not an easy step, but understanding, categorizing, tracking where your money is going first, so then you can make way more intelligent decisions about either diverting your money to somewhere else, or the best case scenario is to save more and invest more, so you can start. You can begin that journey toward financial independence. So maybe you can quit before you're 65 or 70 with a lifestyle that costs a quarter of what you're spending on now. Just imagine that for a minute. Everybody listening to this podcast, if you spent a quarter of what you spend now, how much earlier do you think you could retire? And if you love your job, that question may not mean as much. But if you do lead a high stress life in a high stress job, that question is probably going to be a very, very powerful one to consider.
Wow, that's cool. A lot of that's in the ebook that's totally free on your website.
The ebook itself I sell for
Oh,
$9.97.
that's right. I'm sorry. I bought it. I love it, and I've been reading it because it's a PDF. So I'm sorry. I thought it
Yes,
was a web page because I've been
no
bringing
worries.
it. So it is 9.97, and it's totally worth it. I'm in the middle of reading it now, and it's so well written and in regular words that people can understand. That I appreciate that you put it out there.
Yeah, I don't live my life in yields and bonds and stocks, and I don't use finance terms because I'm not, quite frankly, I'm not a finance guy. I just use regular terms that anybody can relate to, and that's gonna be the best $10. I mean, if you have an interest in financial freedom, and by the end of this podcast, I would be surprised if you don't. This is the best $10 that you will ever invest in yourself, because that is a roadmap to what you have to put in place to make this happen for you.
And
And
I'm
I
gonna back that up because I am reading it, and it's really good. So
well, thank you, Mark. I appreciate that.
no, I appreciate it terribly. But that's not all you're not a finance guy. You're basically a YouTube star. You and your wife are YouTube stars. So let's talk just fun. Like tell me about the streaming life.
Yeah, a Stream in Life was a channel we started back right before we started to travel full time in our Airstream, as a way to document our travels and put it out there for other people to consider. Maybe we build a following that way. We have a little over 18,000 followers now on YouTube, which, quite frankly, for being around for like 4 years, isn't that great. But the followers, yeah, it's nice, but it's not like the thing that we always think about. It's just something fun. Most of us are very creative people, even though our jobs may not let us be that way. And for me, photography was always a hobby of mine. Videography was that I was kind of getting in over my head, to go back to something we talked to earlier with videography, because I was mainly a still photography guy. But now it's like videography, where I'm getting Adobe Premiere and I'm editing video and putting in audio and filming B-roll. This was a whole new world for me, and it was fun because it was creative. And then once people started like watching and commenting and following our journey, I mean, that was a really cool organic experience to see unfold, really.
Cool. So what's exciting that you're doing now that people can follow?
Well, I have I am mainly I spent the majority of my time on Twitter, really reaching out to this type of community. And that by far, that's where I spend the majority of my time. However, we do live in an off-grid place out here in the middle of the desert. And very shortly, I think we're going to be starting the build of a second 1,000 square foot off-grid house from the foundation. Right now, it's just dirt out there. So we're going to start from the bare, like the basically the dirt, and we're going to go to a completely finished house, and I'm going to document that
I was just going to
entire
ask, are you going
process
to
in
document that for us to
video.
watch?
Yes, so even if you have no interest in that, it's it's interesting to see a house being built from scratch. I mean, I don't know everything that I'm going to do either. This is yet another one of those things where I'm getting in way over my head. But that's where YouTube really comes in handy, because that's a amazing free resource where you can learn almost anything
I fixed
on
my washing
YouTube for
machine.
free.
I just went on YouTube and found my kind of washing machine, and I fixed my washing machine watching a
Washing
YouTube
machine,
video.
yep. Leaky faucet, or like how to change oil. I took an entire meteorology class, meteorology 101. I'm interested in weather, on YouTube, completely free. It's an amazing resource if people would use it that way. And I think more and more people are, which is nice.
That's great. So where can people find you?
Well, I have steveadcock.us is my blog, on Twitter at Steve on Speed, all one word. I developed that profile back when I had the Corvette and the motorcycle, so
I was
that's
going to
the
ask,
on
why is it
speed.
Steve on speed?
That's the on. I considered changing it, but at this point, it's yeah, probably won't do that. And YouTube at A Stream in Life. That's our channel name.
So all those links are going to be in the show notes. I really suggest that you follow Steve on Twitter. It's just sound life, finance, mindset advice not a lot of the crazy that you can find in the self-help arena that I live in. So Steve, thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
You are very, very welcome, Mark. I appreciate you having me.
Hopefully you and I have broken one or two chains to help people see that they can be free.
Exactly. That's all I can possibly hope for. Just get that ball rolling.
Man, that's all right. So thank you to everybody else. I love you. I appreciate your time and attention. Have a great rest of the day.